After making it back to the conference finals for the first time in 10 years, the Pacers had a solid offseason. They retained many of the free agents that helped get them there, including Andrew Nemhard, who was perhaps the breakout player of the NBA playoffs. They re signed TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin as well, who were fantastic off the bench for them in the playoffs. And there was a lot of excitement. It was probably the most anticipated season that the Pacers have had since the Paul George versus the Heatles days. Unfortunately for the Pacers, they have not quite had the start that they wanted to get off to this year, as they currently sit at 6-8 and 8th overall in the Eastern Conference. And they play the Rockets in Houston tonight, so they could very easily fall another game under 500. And the biggest reason why they've had a lack of success so far is because of the play of Tyrese Halliburton. Everybody knows that he's having a really disappointing start to the year, but his numbers have really taken a dive from last year. He's averaging 4 less points per game, almost 3 less assists per game as well, and on much less efficient shooting. Every shooting stat for him has cratered this year, including the fact that he was one of the best three-point shooters in the entire NBA coming into this season, and he has been quite literally the worst shooter in the entire NBA with 100 threes attempted this year. Because of his struggles with jump shooting, you'd think that he'd be trying to get to the bucket more and either get some easy layups or draw some fouls, but he's actually getting to the rim less than ever before in his career. The past 2 years in Indianapolis, he's taken about 25% of his shots at the rim, but this year it's down to just 13%. And because of Tyrese's struggles, a lot of players on the team have tried to make up for it, and it just kind of leads to some bad shots and some really ugly turnovers. The Pacers' turnover rate was 8th last year in the league, and it's dropped all the way down to 13th this year. So a pretty noticeable drop off in efficiency, and it's led them to being an average team taking care of the ball. The second biggest reason why I think the Pacers are struggling so far this year is they've had a lot of bad injury luck. Andrew Nemhard, who I talked about before, he's missed half the team's games so far this year. Aaron Nesmith, who's the starting small forward, he's missed 8 out of the 14 games. To start the season, Isaiah Jackson, their backup center, was injured with an ankle injury, I believe, so James Wiseman took his job and then tore his Achilles in his first shift of basketball in the first game of the year. And then after that, Isaiah Jackson came back for 5 games and then tore his Achilles. Because of that, the Pacers have had to play a lot of small ball and put Pascal Siakam and Obi Toppin at the 5 in some of the bench units, and it's led to them being one of the worst rebounding teams in the league. It wasn't anything new for the Pacers, but it has gotten worse than in prior years, as they're now in the bottom 5 of offensive rebounding rate and in the bottom 5 in opponent offensive rebounding rate. And giving up so many extra possessions to the other team while not getting some back for yourself is just really, really bad in the long run, and it's going to cost you a couple games. It already has cost them at least one. Yesterday, Shams tweeted out that the Pacers signed Moses Brown from the G League, who hopefully he will be able to come in and give the team some solid minutes behind Miles Turner. They really need it. And probably the most bizarre reason why the Pacers are off to their slow start is that they have kind of lost their identity. They are not pushing the ball very much in transition at all, at least compared to what they have in the past. Last year they were 7th in transition frequency, and this year they've dropped all the way down to 20th in the league, which is pretty crazy considering that Halliburton has been healthy and he was the driving force of that the past couple years. And adding on to the fact that their transition frequency has dropped a lot, their efficiency has plummeted. Last year they were 2nd in the league in transition points per possession. This year they've dropped all the way to 16th. It really feels as though the Pascal Siakam trade last year kind of got rid of their pace a little bit. It definitely seemed noticeable last year, and it feels very noticeable this year that their tempo is slowing down. And I'm not really sure why, because Pascal is really good in transition. He can run the floor and he can also handle it as well. Luckily for the Pacers, it's still very early in the season, and they play in a just terrible Eastern Conference, quite frankly, outside of Cleveland and Boston. The Magic look great, even without Paolo, but after that, it really drops off. Everyone thought the Sixers would be fantastic this season, and I had them third in my record predictions for the Eastern Conference, and they're sitting at 2-11 right now, and the Bucks also look horrendous. So the Pacers, if they can shore things up and Tyrese gets back to an all-star level. He doesn't have to be all NBA like last year, but if he can get back to an all-star level, I still have a lot of faith in this Pacers team to finish the season strong and to look like a real dark horse entering the NBA playoffs. I think that they can definitely win one series. Whether they can get back to the Eastern Conference Finals or not is kind of a toss-up. I probably don't think they can as long as Boston and Cleveland remain healthy. It's not going to be the easiest thing ever, but I think the Pacers will get back on track, especially Tyrese. I don't think he's this 16 and 8 guy with some of the worst shooting splits in the league. I don't think that he's ever going to put up the stats like he did at the beginning of last season, where he legitimately looked like a top 10 player in the league. But I think he'll bounce back from the rough start, and the Pacers will probably be fine in the long run and probably do about what we expected them to do.